and Happy New Year to you all. Obviously, the Scrutiny Committee on the 14th of January 2025. I'm Councillor Charlotte Goldsworthy and I will be chairing this meeting. Before we move on to the next agenda item, please note that this meeting is recorded. Please can you ensure that all your phones are switched to silent for the duration of the meeting. Can members and officers who are present in the chamber please use their microphones when speaking. When asked to raise your hand, can members who are virtually viewing this meeting raise your electronic hand, and members who are in the chamber please raise your physical hand. For those members virtually viewing this meeting, please can you keep the chat function for urgent IT issues and not for questions or comments. I wish to remind members signing in remotely of their legal obligation to have their cameras switched on during the meeting, please, in order to be seen and heard while participating in council business. Now I will move on to agenda item 2. Are there any declarations of interest? I have had none.
I can see no declarations of interest, Chair.
Right, agenda item 3. The report included on our scrutiny agenda is the consultation on 2025-26 budget proposals. Today we will be looking at the elements that fall under the remit of this committee. Your comments from this meeting will form part of the formal consultation response for the budget. Members are encouraged to put forward any alternative proposals which they can be considered once the consultation period is ended. Today, what we will be doing, we will be going through each item line by line and have briefings by officers. So now I'll go straight to Andrew to see if you have anything additional you'd like to add.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members, and Happy New Year to you, especially those I haven't seen already. So this is a really important scrutiny meeting as far as we are concerned. This gives members of this scrutiny committee the opportunity to look at the proposals in detail for the savings that we've made as a part of the overall savings for the council for next year. Start by saying, and Chair, I'm going to speak for a few minutes if that's okay, because I do want to introduce this and underline how important this is. But I'll start by saying that this is probably one of the most difficult times in my career. So I've been managing and leading social services departments in a number of local authorities, probably for the last 20 years. Probably feels, although we've been through difficult periods before, it probably feels more difficult than it has done for the previous 20 years of my leadership career in any case. And that's because we're having to make savings on top of the savings that we've already made. But in light of those savings, we're also having to deal with additional demand and complexity of demand. So those we're seeing more very vulnerable people in our societies who need our support, and it is more and more difficult now with the finances that we've got and the setup that we've got across Wales for us to meet all of those needs. So it's a really difficult time. You'll see from the papers that our proposals are for savings of over £5.4 million. That's a significant amount of money. We're not going to be able to take that amount of money out of the budget for social services, especially, as I said, when we are seeing an increased demand without there being some impact on that. And that is, an important reason why you're here as members on behalf of your constituents and on behalf of the council to make sure that the savings that we make, that you understand what the impact of those savings will be, because there will be impact. When and when I talk about we, I'm talking about myself, principal officers, the heads of service have thought about how we make the savings again this year. We've followed the same methodology and thinking that we followed in previous years where we've had to make significant savings like this. And as you know, I've rehearsed this with you as a committee a number of times. From my point of view as the director, there are 3 ways in social services and housing to save money. We can either reduce costs by negotiating with those people that we contract with, so reducing our fees and charges. And I don't see any opportunity, and as the heads of service and principal officers, we don't see any real opportunity for us to reduce costs by negotiating with those organizations that we do business with. So that's residential care providers, domiciliary care providers in the main, who are already feeling really pressurized by the current financial situation. And they're saying to us that they need above inflation uplifts year on year at the moment. So very little scope, as far as I'm concerned, to make significant savings in that area. The other option would be to reduce our staffing. And of course, we need to look seriously at that. We don't want to have too many staff where we don't need those. But there is a real risk, and I've rehearsed this on a number of occasions with you, that if we reduce staffing by too much, that we lose control of the demand that we see, and then we start paying more money for those people who are vulnerable because we're not properly assessing their needs because we don't have the staff to do that. So I've always tried to shy away and advise you as members that actually cutting our professional staff is not the way to go. But of course, we've looked at some of that, and where we can, you'll see within the savings, we've made some suggestions around that. But that is a small scale. So again, and this is generally very high risk after what I've already said to you about rising demand. But again, we've come down on the final way that we might save money, and that is controlling the demand that we have coming through the door. And what that means is making sure that when we assess those individuals who are vulnerable, that we properly understand what it is that they need and provide for those needs, but we don't over provide. And what that means is a lot of work for social workers, all of the staff within the services, to make sure that we are doing what we need to on a statutory basis, but going no further than that. That's really difficult. It's really difficult for us as senior leadership across social services, because of course we want to provide for everyone who needs to be provided for. And at the moment, we're not able to do that. So we're actually reducing our impacts as far as vulnerable people are concerned to meeting their statutory needs. We need to also make sure that we maintain the early intervention and prevention, so that what we do is that we don't lose sight of the fact that we have people with emerging needs, and if we allow those emerging needs to continue to grow, that they will become very difficult for that individual and for those individuals to cope with, and create more need within our services, which obviously will cost money. So controlling demand is not an easy thing to do. It is highly risky, and it's something which we have done year on year. But I do believe, members, that if what we did to save £5.5 million was to cut our staffing, which you'll see in lots of other local authorities they are doing, I think that we will get ourselves very quickly into real difficulties. So I hope that you accept that, but I'm happy to be challenged on that today. I think that's a reasonable challenge for you to make. I think today what we're going to do is ask the heads of service to go through each line of the savings. And it's really important that you as members understand, as I said, the impact of those savings. Well, first of all, whether you think they are realistic, so you understand what it is that we'll be doing differently next year. Whether you think the savings are realistic, and making sure that you understand what the impact of those savings are. As I say, you can't take £5.5 million out of any budget where we are already struggling to maintain that budget year on year without there being some impact. So you need to make sure that you're understanding what the impact is, and that you are agreeing that those proposals are in fact realistic and achievable, and the right sort of savings for vulnerable people in Neath Talbot. So, Chair, that's what I wanted to say, just as a point of introduction. I'm happy then to hand back to you and go to heads of service for their individual briefings. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you. So we'll go straight into housing and communities, which is Shelley Howard, and that is on reference A.
Thank you very much, Chair. So the Housing and Communities Department have a number of proposals that focus on improving services for those that require homelessness support from the council, and will also become more cost effective in the way that we provide services to those people. The reason why the detail isn't included in this report is because those proposals haven't yet gone through the official decision-making process, so we didn't want to put too much detail in at this stage. Two of our proposals that will help us to achieve our efficiency savings are going to be presented to Scrutiny in January and then Cabinet in February. And there'll be a number of additional proposals that we will be presenting for decision over the next couple of months as well. Whilst I am personally confident that I will be able to achieve the 5% saving for our department, my main concern is the additional costs of meeting the rising demand for temporary accommodation, which is incredibly costly for the council. So when I was before you this time last year to talk about our budget, we had around 200 households at any one point in time in temporary accommodation. Despite the excellent work of our homelessness team, in which they've managed to prevent well over 70% of people that contact us from becoming homeless, unfortunately, this figure has risen so that now we are supporting around 250 households at any one point in time, which is incredibly disappointing. So that, combined with the lack of temporary accommodation options, results in us continuing to be in this position where we're using bed and breakfasts. And because of that, this year we are expected to spend £600,000 more than we spent in the previous financial year. So in total, that means this financial year we will have spent around £3.6 million on temporary accommodation. It's really important for us to realise that we're not actually receiving any additional money as a council to meet the cost of this rising demand. And so this is a cost that as a council we can't continue to absorb, and my department then needs to work towards reducing temporary accommodation, demand and also spend. So that's the reason why over the next couple of months I'll be presenting to you a number of different proposals that, alongside improving services for people and improving outcomes for those people that find themselves homeless, will also aim to achieve efficiency savings that will be in excess of the £112,000 target within this document before you today. The challenge for me and my team is to address the fundamental issues that are causing so many people to require temporary accommodation for such long periods of time. We've done some excellent work over the last couple of months around families that find themselves in a situation where they become homeless. Very rarely now will families be placed in bed and breakfasts, and if they are, it's only for a couple of days, no more than a week or two, whilst we find more suitable and appropriate temporary accommodation for them. And also, through our work, the average number of days that a family stays in temporary accommodation has reduced from 128 days in 23-24 to 84 days. So we've made some great strides there. But our greatest challenge that we face right now is that we've got just over 200 single people in temporary accommodation. That makes up 80% of all homeless households that we support. And it is that cohort that spend the longest periods of time in temporary accommodation. So over the last 18 months, 21 households were in accommodation for over 12 months, and 225 households were in temporary accommodation for between 9 and 12 months. Providing alternatives to bed and breakfast through the provision of better temporary accommodation models and helping people quickly move out of temporary accommodation into permanent accommodation for this cohort will be one of our main focuses over the next 12 months. So that will include us bringing to you proposals on different types of temporary accommodation models so that we don't have to rely on bed and breakfasts, looking at what type of support and interventions we can put in place to help people obtain a new home and, more importantly, retain that new home long term, and also how we can increase the availability of affordable housing for single households. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Shelley. In regards to this, can you just explain, as a local authority, and obviously there's social housing, we're only allowed a certain number of units. Can you just explain a bit to the committee about that? Because obviously I think it's important that everyone sees the barriers that you have as well.
It is. It's really difficult, and that is one of our biggest challenges. We are a non-stock holding local authority. And essentially what that means is we can only own and operate 50 units of accommodation without opening up our housing revenue account, which is a very difficult process to do. When I say 50 units, that doesn't even mean 50 houses, that means like 50 bed spaces. So we don't have the ability, like some other local authorities might do, to go out and actively purchase houses to maybe accommodate those people that struggle to find accommodation elsewhere, or to open up new temporary accommodation units that we can own and operate ourselves. And it does actually come at a financial cost to the council, because where we do not own our own accommodation, we're only able to keep £80 housing benefit for that household. So when we own our own temporary accommodation, for example, we're able to retain the full amount of housing benefit, and we just can't do that. So we're leasing about 93 units of temporary accommodation, and we only get £80 per unit for that, whereas if we owned it, we would be able to generate much more income coming in, which would help offset some of these costs as well.
Thank you. Members, do you have any questions to Shelley? I don't see any. So we'll move straight on, and we're going straight to B, which is Kerry Warren, please.
Good morning, everyone. Just some Kerry Warren, Head of Children's Services for Neath, Talbot, as you all know, and just to reflect really on some of the things that the Director of Social Services have said. I fully support Andrew's position. These are tough times, and we have known tough times over the years. I don't know what it is about this year and perhaps last year, maybe coming out of COVID, where we're all feeling a little bit vulnerable, and there's so many things have changed during the pandemic. But I think it has had has made an impact, I think, on all of us. So I do understand what Andrew was saying in terms of, we've known tough times before, but this is something that's been really tough. But I'm also reminded during those times of the experience that we've got within children's services and within social services, and the benefit of that experience in terms of a number of senior officers, including myself and the director, coming from safeguarding backgrounds. And I say that because it's important that you have trust and confidence in us. Nothing that I do, nothing that my team does or the director does, isn't without huge consideration to safeguarding the most vulnerable families, people, communities, children within Neath Talbot. And I'm also reminded at the same time then about having the experience of our finance team. So, we couldn't do this without that experience. And just to recognise that with Bethan and with Jeff and Darcy, because they give us advice and options to consider in what is a very difficult sort of arena at the moment when we're looking at our finances. So it's to bear that all in mind, really, when I look at the look at my own budget. And I know we've gone through this exercise before. We're going to do it again, line by line, and I'm happy to answer any questions. So in terms of a proposal for saving of £232,000 with regards to the natural reduction in the number of non-looked after children, and I'm not sure I was absolutely clear in what we were talking about in describing that last time. And these are children that would have been, they formally looked after, and they've become, through the court process, they've become subject to special guardianship orders, residence orders, adoption allowances, and they naturally come to an end. So they would either come to an end because they've turned 18, or they would have come to an end because they don't need the level of support following a social work assessment. That's changed naturally as those young people have got older. So you'll see that coming down. That does happen naturally and give us a buffer there. And obviously the risk there is around if those special guardianship orders were to increase, or if adoption orders were to increase, then that leaves us with less money to play with. And that means that, you know, following us being involved with the family, carrying out a social work assessment, going into court proceedings, if those numbers of assessments that we were recommending, a family needed a special guardianship order, so that means that a family would be looking after children within their own family or friends, usually as a special guardian, or a couple have been assessed and approved as adopters. You know, if those numbers were to increase, then obviously that leaves us with less money. All I can say to you is, of course, there is a risk attached to that. But over several years now, we've seen a reduction in the number of children that are permanently removed from their families. It's only when there is no safe alternative would that happen. So we've seen a natural reduction in the number of children being placed for adoption. And we've seen a steadying of the number of children that are subject to special guardianship orders. I'm going to look to Bethan because she gives me sage-like counsel and she's nodding. Anything I should add to that, Bethan?
No, I don't think so. I think what we've seen is the number of special guardianship orders have decreased over the period. I'm not seeing the same numbers coming in. So there has been a natural reduction of allowances. So we've been able to make those savings quite easily as a result of that. And there is a contingency built in. I would like to make that clear, just in case there are new orders throughout the year. There is a contingency built in for the majority of allowances, which the service should be able to manage in year, dependent on the numbers that come through.
Members, do you have any questions on that? I know that Helen had a question, but in fairness, you've answered that, so there's not a question on that now. No, so we'll move on. So again, Kerry, it's yourself.
Okay, so that's the review of children's services structure and a reduction of posts where appropriate. And that's a scary statement to make. So when you're talking about anything that says, you know, the word reduction or review, I'm not one to restructure, or, you know, unless it's you know, it's time to do it. And I think for children's services, the former head of service, you know, we went through a huge restructure or rebuilding of children's services back in 2012. We haven't reviewed that in any sort of big way since that time. So there's been reviews of parts of my service, but there hasn't been a whole service review. As I mentioned last time, you know, we learned a lot during COVID. We've spent a lot of time talking to families, talking to young people, looking at services, speaking with the workforce. And what I can see is that, you know, it's time for review. We have too many decision makers now within the service, and not enough doers, not enough workers on the ground that are able to offer that practical support. That's what we've been told by the teams themselves, by the families that we're supporting, by partners, and that's what we're listening to. So this is not a reduction of social workers. Again, reflecting on what the director said at the start, I'm not touching, you know, the social work staff. What I am looking at is how many, some of the teams are, you know, have too many deputy team managers or too many consultants, and not enough staff. So some of those posts would be, the resource would be used to fund more practical support, family support going into teams. But just to reassure you as well, we've done an exercise already looking and having those conversations with team managers who are worried. You know, it's natural whenever those conversations take place, they would be worried about some of that. And we've offered that reassurance, and I'll continue to front that and meet with those managers and with the teams themselves. But this isn't talking about diluting services. This is talking about changing the way that the service is structured in order for us to be more flexible, for us to be more responsive during the evenings, during weekends, and perhaps, as I said, bring more workers in and have less team managers potentially and decision makers. Now, we've already started that exercise, and we're confident there certainly wouldn't be any compulsory redundancies. We've had a few members of staff approach us about voluntary redundancy. They're of the age they want to leave, and we're able to support them with that. And I would say, after meeting last time and having this discussion with you, I'm confident that there wouldn't be any member of staff left in a position where they felt they were being pushed out or having to leave when they didn't want to leave. And I would be confident that the service will be stronger as a result of us going through this exercise. I'll stop there, Chair.
I know Helen's got a question.
Yeah, it's a couple of questions actually. Sorry, Kerry. Can you provide a bit more information on the negative impact of this proposal? Is it considered a high-risk strategy both for the staff and for child protection? And also, do you think you're going to have any issues you say you want to have more doers, which I'm assuming are lower grade staff. Are you going to have issues with recruitment with that? Because I know that we've often had problems with recruitment. So yeah, that's my questions.
Both very good questions. And the first one, in terms of a negative impact, as soon as you start having that conversation, there is an impact on your workforce. And I think, and we saw that before Christmas when we started to have those initial conversations with the workforce. The trick is, I think, is not to delay. I think it's to be very clear with the workforce, create opportunities where you come and you do this with the workforce and you talk to them and respond to any worries they have, and that we are clear in terms of a time frame. So we've agreed that we're meeting tomorrow, where they'll see that first draft then of a proposal in its infancy in terms of some of the things that we're talking about. And I think that will have a very reassuring effect. Until you see something written down, I accept that that's going to be, a concern. To me, that's the biggest negative impact, which we're taking care of, because so much within a social service in any large organisation, it'll be the rumour, it'll be the thought of something that might happen as opposed to the reality of the situation. I'm going to bring in Bethan again now to see whether there's any other negative impacts that I've not mentioned.
Not that I'm aware of. So there are a number of vacancies within the service. So I think in terms of impact, it should be managed by the service itself going forward.
And then in relation to the second point about doers, the beauty of this is that we've, during COVID and coming out of COVID, we recognised that we needed more practical support, family support style workers that very much roll your sleeves up, get in with families early, and they are paid at a lower grade. What we learned was that within children's services, there's a number of very good people out there that want to work in social care, want to work in children's as well as in adult social care. So when we, just give an example, put an advert out for that sort of worker, the problem we have is the amount, the volume of applications that we get back. So I think last time they did it, it was something like 28 people per post. So we wouldn't have we don't have an issue with that, and also, as the senior team are very good at talent spotting, we've been very successful at seeing then they've been very good members of staff coming in that we would then be supporting to go through in terms of succession planning for the social work course. So then we start growing our own again.
Okay, she wants to come back in, yeah.
Yeah, sorry to come back in. I noted that you said that they're very good at talent spotting, but I just want to go back to the child protection issue. If you've got people of less experience and what have you, do you feel there's any risk for doing that?
No, not at all. I think we're one of the most experienced children's services in the country, and that's at all levels within the service. So if you're thinking of perhaps your support workers coming in, the team around them in terms of the support they would get is invaluable, and they don't go out and do anything on their own. And the nature of the role is one, it's very much practical support with families, helping to support families do the basics, with household routines, with some parenting, activity based with children. But they will only do that after they've have a full induction first of all, and then spent some time with very experienced workers working alongside them.
Yeah. Do we have Peter Richards up next, please?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Kerry. And can I thank the Director for his introduction and his, I suppose, erring on the side of caution when we make these decisions. What I'd like to say is a lot of these presumptions are based on looked after children numbers reducing. What risks do we have to consider with regards to the present climate within the UK with regards to the rise in mental health, the reduction in the loss of jobs in Neath Talbot, particularly with Tata and possibly other companies? There are risks there, and what have we built in for those risks? Because I see it, if we start reducing staffing levels and taking for granted that the LAC numbers will go down, there's got to be an element of risk there. And what consideration has been given to that risk whilst proposing these reductions? Thank you, Chair.
Do you want to come in first then, Andrew, before I come back?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thanks very much, Councillor Richards, for that question. I think that's a really important question. So I think in discussions that Kerry and I have had, I think we both feel that there is more that we can do to ensure that children can stay safely within their own homes. And Kerry can describe some of the work that we're doing around that. Our transformation programs are all about how do we support children, as I say, safely to stay within their own home. So we think there's still scope to reduce the number of looked after children, but that will happen or it won't happen. So we've always said that we will respond to individual children's needs as and when they arise. And if children need to come into the care system in order to safeguard their needs, then we will do that. But I think what we believe is that we've created enough of a service provision, a breadth of service provision, not just in the council, but across the third sector as well, to support families across Neath Talbot. And if we do that, then they're more able to cope with some of those stresses and strains that you're talking about, Councillor Richards, which no doubt we see people having to put to manage at the moment. So that is, increases in mental health issues, increases in poverty across the county borough. That all adds to stresses and tensions. We believe that we have support services in place to support families rather than having to take the nuclear option of removing their children. So we're quite confident around that. I'm pretty sure that Kerry will reassure you that any staffing reductions that we have are not going to impact on our assessments of our most vulnerable families. That will continue. That will continue to maintain the expertise that we've demonstrated in children's services in Neath Talbot over the last 10 years. So I think you should be reassured that this is something that can be done in the way that Kerry is describing. I would say that just to go back to what Kerry was saying about some of the risks in response to the last question, given that I've got the mic, the real risk in any reduction of staff in social services is that social workers and social work managers start to worry about their positions, and they start to look elsewhere. And that can happen because rumor goes flying around, which is not necessarily true, but people listen to rumor, unfortunately. So all of that needs to be managed really carefully. I've seen a number of local authorities that have lost the confidence of their social work staff because they've moved into a reduction of staffing in the wrong way. They've allowed rumours to build without talking to staff. I know that's not what Kerry and her managers will be doing, and so I'm confident in that as well. Thanks, Kerry.
Yeah, thank you for that. And that's a really important point, really. And I know because we all have that responsibility, isn't it? Information is power. And you know what it's like in any large organisation. A whisper, carries it goes like wildfire. And having had and still been responsible now for Hillside for a few years, I understand the damage that can cause when we're not kind of mindful of all of that. So I would ask you all to perhaps, when we're talking about what this plan involves, to remember the principles really that stand behind it. I've said it over many years now in Neath Talbot. The workforce is everything to us. You don't look after your workforce at your peril, and they know that. And we've developed that working relationship with them. Councillor Richards is right in that we are seeing so many more families now in need, and we've talked about this before, families that would never have come to our attention before. Some members of a workforce within the council are finding things really hard and having to turn to us for help. Far more families now pushed into poverty, and you're seeing that impact in terms of children's mental health as well as adults, the parents, those grown-ups that are there to look after them, really struggling. And for a child growing up, you don't need to know the ins and outs of everything, and you shouldn't, but you rely on those people that are around you to look okay, to act okay, and school again being somewhere that is a safe haven. And when you see that change from a child's eye, where those things are not quite as they were before, that is a big worry for children, and we're starting to see that play out from quite young children right the way through to sort of comprehensive school age, and then a much more vulnerable cohort of young adults. My biggest worry is around youngsters 17, 18 up to the age of about 25, where they are really struggling. But it's down to us working together then within our own directorate, with our partners, and with health colleagues in particular, to make sure that we've got as good strong arrangements in place to identify those youngsters and those children early enough to be able to support them. I do understand Councillor Richards' concerns. We share them. I think you mentioned UASC there, Councillor Richards, in terms of unaccompanied asylum-seeking children. That's not a term that we would have ever heard of. It was probably something that was never talked about in Neath Talbot or in the South Wales valleys, or even in the country maybe years ago. But that's something now that it's something that's talked about every day, rightly so, because these are very vulnerable young people that need our support, need our guidance, and those numbers of youngsters in that position keep rising. So we have very good arrangements locally and across the region to support those young people, but they are very young, very vulnerable youngsters that we often don't know the backstory to those youngsters, where we have the benefit of that when we're dealing with supporting youngsters that have grown up in the area. I don't know whether there's anything else you want to come back on in terms of that point, or shall I move on?
Is that okay for you, Pete?
Chair, can I just come back on
Yeah, of course can.
Two points. I think Kerry, I know the work that we've done in children's services since 2012. We can't go back to 2012 because we haven't got the money we had in 2012, because we put a lot of money into children's services to make it what it is today. And it is probably the best children's services in Wales. And that's down to the money we put in. But what I will say is, myself as a local member, and I suppose all local members, are more aware now of looked after children than ever before. And the numbers are rising within communities, and members are aware of that. So I know we have got challenges. Hopefully we get through, but there's no money there. We just need to be erring on the side of caution, on this budget. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Pete. Sharon, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, thanks, Andrew. That was a really concise introduction, and it's worrying that we're in this position, really. But I got just a couple of points. I think Helen Kerry Clark asked about child protection. Can we just be clear on the answer there? Is this, whatever we are suggesting, going to have any impact whatsoever on child protection? And the next points are on about the doers. Kerry was saying about the doers. Well, I'm surmising that all the comments made today are based on the current workforce. So when you're talking about voluntary redundancies, I'm thinking that we're not going to fill those roles. What impact is that going to have on all the things that Peter has just brought up as well? And of course, we can all bet a bottom dollar that there's going to be an increase given the current circumstances in Port Talbot, with the steelworks, etc. So that is a big factor. Have we factored that in? Because we wouldn't know how many people want voluntary redundancy. What roles are they in? What impact is that going to have on other roles? And obviously it's going to just have a ripple effect. Thanks.
Okay, if I take the first point in terms of child protection, yes, it will have an impact on child protection. It will have a positive impact. Child protection is about, essentially building relationships, sharing information, creating conditions at all levels within the service, within the workforce, within a council, with partners, with families. And the stronger all of that is, the safer children are within their own homes, and it reduces the number of concerns that we have in respect of children. So bringing in staff that get on with families, those harder to reach families in particular, those characters, families that are likely to lose their temper, show their frustrations, maybe in school, with health visitors, often with social workers. But workers having a resilience and an understanding of those families, an understanding of what's behind that, so that they meet those challenges, they overcome those barriers, and they hang in there. And we see those positive outcomes of those young people. Not all of those young people would be able to stay at home, but we also build up those relationships with their extended family, those important people in those children's lives. So for the majority of those children, they are able to stay in the community. I'm sorry, but this is such an important question when it's about child protection, Chair. If I could just have a second to finish my...
Wait me a minute. Just hold on now. I'm having two of you talking now.
We're talking about the same thing. Are you saying then that we're increasing that side of staffing?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. So we're increasing that side of staffing. So none of the voluntary redundancies that we're talking about, or the cuts anywhere else, will impact on that then?
No, in fact, right. That's how we're able to increase it.
Kerry. Thank you, Kerry, for that.
I think if I've remembered that rightly, I think the second part of the question is particularly in relation to perhaps Tata and perhaps showing the pressures the community are under, and how are we going to manage all of this when we've got a large section, if you like, of our community that's likely to be thrown into even harder financial sort of positions, if I've got that right.
That is
Sharon?
part, yeah, that's part of it, Kerry. But the other part is you talked about voluntary redundancies. How many roughly would we be looking at, and what impact is that going to have on the service?
Well, I'm looking now to our accountant because I don't want to give you the wrong numbers, but we are talking very low numbers of voluntary redundancy, Beth, isn't it? I think, how many have we got? Is there, I don't think there's 5, is there? I was trying to think up to 5, but across the whole service.
It's
Right.
It's not a substantial amount, no, it's quite minimal.
Yeah, it certainly isn't a substantial amount of staff.
So and obviously those roles are not going to be filled then, are they?
Those roles won't be filled.
So will their workload, what would have been their workload, have any impact on our other staff?
As I said, you know, we've got we're top heavy in too many decision makers. So it's not everything will have an impact, as Andrew talked about. When you're talking about that much money being saved, it'll be a different way of working, but it's not a way of working that's going to either put undue pressure on the staff that are already there, or the managers that are already there, or lead to unsafe or poor decision making, decisions being made as a result of this plan.
Okay, thank you, Kerry.
Thank you.
No, your question. When you go back to obviously like the doers and social workers and that, and obviously looking at doing the cuts, currently do the social workers now do meetings online? Is it going to be taken away from in-person meetings to obviously cut time out, traveling time, this, that, and the other? Because obviously as a social worker, the face-to-face, the meetings in person are key, and vital. Yes, a little check-in here and again, but you know, obviously assessments and that, and the transitioning to say the online or the working from home, or how much of that obviously would increase, if any?
That's a very good question, Chair. I'm glad to have the opportunity to respond to that. So although, of course, there are advantages of being online, we can see that today. I'm not suggesting that there shouldn't be any times when children's services don't speak to families online. In fact, probably the best thing that came out of COVID was being able to talk to older children. So teenagers prefer to talk to us online. So if there's a choice between not being able to get hold of that young person, because when they've gone around the house, they're in bed, they won't come out of bed, they won't come, you know, and spend time with the worker, to seeing them online, I can see the benefit of that. But we've got the managers meeting tomorrow, actually. We've just gone through an exercise over the last 3 months of looking at post-COVID, and as a service, how much of our business is still online and the impact that has on families. So we've had our participation and engagement officers working with families, with youngsters, giving us feedback on all of that, to talk to us about what that experience is like for them in all of our business. So from child in need, as I'll always call it, child in need meetings, so children in need of care and support, to your core group meetings, which is your meeting that you have when you've got children that are subject to child protection plans, right the way through the process, you know. Because for me, we've just heard about, we've just had as you all know, we've seen some very shocking headlines recently in the news where we've had another young person, Sarah, who was murdered at the hands of her dad and others that were supposed to be looking after her and keeping her safe. For me, if you see children, if you spend time with children and their families, that hugely reduces the risk of children being harmed. There is no substitute to seeing children. So for me, and I know I'm a pain with the senior management team, but they all support this, you will see going forward much more face-to-face, you know, time spent with children and their families, and less online meetings when that's deemed to be the most appropriate thing to do.
Great, thank you. Right, Kerry, it's you again.
Where am I by?
Yeah,
So the
you're now on D.
Right, so the reduction in the budget for the in-house allowances, external agency costs and carer travel. I'm going to bring Beth in because she describes this better than I can in terms of that buffer that we've always had. So for me, I understand this as, you know, because the number of children in foster care have been reducing due to the quality of the social work practice, we've had money there that we've been able to rely on, I suppose, using language that certainly I understand and hopefully everybody does as well. But we're taking that away. So there is a risk there. And perhaps I'll bring in Beth in first and then I'll say my bit.
Yes, so in terms of the in-house allowances, historically, there has been a risk in that, historically, that it's been offset against residential overspends. So there is a risk in terms of that going forward. Residential is a very volatile area in terms of costings and the complexities of the young people placed. So, however, going forward, obviously, the transformation agenda which Children's Services put forward with Foster Plus, it's hoping that obviously we'll see that positive impact on the budget where Foster Plus carers there'll be the availability of the options for the service to place with these Foster Plus carers, impacted positively on the budget and more importantly on the young person being placed as well. There is still a contingency built in terms of the in-house allowances, external fostering allowances as well. So it depends on the area and what contingency is built in. We've spoken with the principal officers involved. They're aware of what's built in. They obviously know cases across the service where there's likely to be demand and where there's not. So from what we know as of now, this will be manageable going forward for the service. And in terms of carer travel, again, because we've seen a reduction in the looked after children numbers and for paying less in terms of foster carer travel. So there's been a reduction in terms of travel for that as well.
And it would be remiss of me, you know, as Bethan has said, not to kind of, you know, sort of state that, you know, that is a risk. That is a risk because we're talking about children's lives. So, you know, if a child, not only if a child needs to come into care, they will come into care. If the assessment is agreed that a child needs to come into residential care, then that child will come into residential care. And the average cost, I think, Beth, isn't it, is over, I say 250,000 as an average, but it's higher than that, I think, isn't it? But
it depends if we get any health funding. So gross, you're looking around 300k per annum. And then if there's health funding, you're looking around 250k average.
So two youngsters, you know, blows that budget. What I will tell committee this morning is we're delighted, as we know, we've got two families that have gone through that process and introductions and are well underway. There's somebody up in Liverpool this morning, so we are already bringing children back home. And you'll see the full extent of that in terms of finances for this next financial year. I'm happy to answer any questions, Joe.
No, I don't think so either. No, we haven't, so we can move straight on there.
Thank you.
Oh, wait there, bear with me. Yeah, members, do you have any questions? Because I can't see anyone that have indicated. No, that's it. Okay.
Moving on, more straightforward one in terms of income generation. This is likely to go up. It's not going to go up in sort of with large numbers, but I am already, you know, after the new year, had some conversations with colleagues of mine across Wales where this is where we've got experienced foster carers that don't have anyone living with them, and we've got other local authorities that need foster carers. So it's at 52,000 at the moment, but given the conversations I've had over the last few days, that's likely to increase, and that's obviously income generation. Beth, anything else to add to that? No. She's earning her crust this morning.
She is today. You are. Members, any questions on that? I think the next one is quite straightforward.
That's right, and I explained on the last occasion, so there's a small saving there of 21,000. It won't be of any impact to us as a service. And then the discretionary spend, and there's a small saving there, Bethan, with regards to, so the managers themselves, there's a devolved budget, so they each have a set amount. And what we've done is just put an extra layer in of scrutiny, so that before if they needed to go over, they'd go over and then they'd come and tell us about it after. What I've said is, come and tell us the story, but let me and the principal officers make that decision in terms of, agreeing that overspend, and just tightening things up in that way has seen a small sort of saving there, Beth, isn't it? And then the taxi routes. I know that's a small amount of money, but I tell you what, we've worked our socks off with these taxi routes, and common sense has dictated. So the officers have got together. We've talked to foster carers, we've talked to families, we've been, we've looked at the routes and made some common sense decisions around how do we reduce what was a huge cost. And we've doubled up. So we've had families and carers that live near each other sharing that route. The lower, the support worker that I'm talking about in terms of that grade, they are already transporting children as part of their job. So now we've built that in. So they're doing some of the taking to school and bringing from school, and then they're not with strangers in the car. So there's a whole host of things that we've done there at no additional cost to us, because it's our own staff that have done it. And we've seen I am pleased that that's come down a little bit.
Any questions, members, on that? I see none. No, Angela. It's you now, Ange.
Save the best to last. Okay, thanks. Good morning, members. I'll take you through line by line, and then I'm going to ask the principal officers who are responsible for the service areas to highlight the risks. So if I start with the direct payments whole system review, £250,000. Paper's already been to Scrutiny and Cabinet about bringing payroll services back in-house, and that'll bring in about £100,000. We're undertaking an outcome-focused review or reassessment of all existing DP packages. When the Social Services and Wellbeing Act was introduced in 2014, it was meant to give choice and control to individuals about how they had their package of care delivered. Over time, it's become a bit of an add-on to existing packages of care. Some packages are now exceeding that of a residential care placement. So we're undertaking a wholesale review that is underway now, and it will be concluded in the next couple of weeks. And obviously that will come to members in due course. And we've also tightened up our system whereby large amounts of money cannot now be accrued in somebody's bank account. After 8 weeks, if somebody hasn't sort of been able to get a PA, personal assistant, we stop that money until that recruitment happens. So the money remains within the council. So I'll ask you, Sue Bradshaw, responsible for this area, just to highlight the risks.
Morning, Sue Bradshaw, Principal Officer for Direct Services. The main risk is that people will perceive it as a reduction in service. They'll see it as a change to their care plan and provision of service. But as Angela rightly says, if people have already got 8 weeks payment within their bank account, until they kind of either recruit or the service starts, they don't need to keep accruing money in that bank account. We clawed back quite a lot of money following an exercise last year, and instead of allowing that money to build up now, we'll stop it at 8 weeks until the service can start.
Any questions on that, members? No. What about going forward then, obviously, with this now? If obviously, again, like we've discussed today about like the tartar pressures and more people may be needing or looking at a PA going forward, how will that have an impact on that then?
It won't. I mean, if we've tried and tried, we can't get PAs, just like we can't get domiciliary care workers.
Yeah.
I mean, there's opportunities there for the council. We've said this all along. We've got transformation money. We could build a workforce around some of this, and we're open to that. We've made that quite clear. There are opportunities, particularly in adult social care, and as I move on, you'll see the more opportunities that are forthcoming.
Okay, and on that note then, we do not have any questions. So if we move on to Jay.
Okay, and this is the big one, £2 million. I can see Hugh twitching at the side of me. So in 23-24, we created a transformation team. This was dedicated social workers, occupational therapists, and some legal representatives. And they were brought in to look specifically at young people transitioning to adulthood and adults who are placed in high-cost residential care out of county. The plan is to bring people back in, develop in-house accommodation, utilising council-owned land. We completed the business case and we've identified the individuals for this, but this will not be delivered before 26-27. So for 25-26, how we're attempting to claw the £2 million is we've been working with RSLs to develop a number of extra care supported living schemes. We're hopeful we'll have around additional 20 units this year to move people out of high cost residential care. We're reviewing all transport and taxi costs. We've looked across Wales at other people's policies, and I think we've been a bit generous in Neath Talbot about how we've been transporting adults to and from certain sites. We're looking to provide additional short-term beds in Tremor. Again, that's to prevent family breakdown and avoid high-cost residential care. And we're reviewing all our day service provision. So for a learning disability clients, for example, the cost of an in-house day service is £55 as opposed to £120 being charged by the private providers. So we're also proposing to extend and convert existing council-owned accommodation to provide more day services in-house. And we're moving away from traditional 9 to 5 to 7 days and evenings.
Great, I like the sound of that, to be honest with you, Ange. Quite exciting times, obviously for us, but not for who.
Could I ask Hayley if she'd just highlight the risks there as well, please?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Thank you. So the biggest risk with anything we do development-wise is time. So with all the will in the world, we've got RSLs who say they can deliver something within 12 months, but we know from experience that, delays happen and that can go on for a longer period of time. And then obviously the perceived taken away or change to services. So like a lot of our development is based on people being willing to move to alternative services, and this is how we work with families really to break down the perception that we are changing or taking something away rather than enhancing services. And then I guess another thing as well is trust, isn't it? So on the face of it, a lot of what we're doing will look like we put in more cost in, but we've sort of got to invest to save in this one, and there's got to be trust along the way with that. There's investment required, yes, but over time that gives us more control over services. We're seeing a lot of people going into services and providers dictating hours. This does give us more control around that and reducing hours so that they're appropriate to the people and meeting their needs. Thank you.
Yeah, if I can bring Hugh in now. Thank you, Hayley.
Yeah, just around that, Chair, thank you. So we have had a discussion in our senior leadership team meeting around deliverability around this, and obviously anything transformational does take time. So we are fully aware that we may not be able to deliver all of this £2 million transformation saving next year, but we're leaving it in as a savings target, and we will manage any sort of timing flows from the use of our reserves. So, Angela and the team have been absolutely on it, but as with anything else involving potential capital work and things always take time. So just wanted to mention that for committee's information.
And I think that's totally understandable. But I think this is the best way of working to obviously improve services and obviously save money. So I think it's a bit long overdue as well now. And I think more of this going forward is a good thing, especially bringing things back in-house. Again, Angela, it's you again. Yes. So, wait there, sorry, Peter, I didn't see you, sorry. Bring Peter in.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Angela. I think this is a massive figure, 2 million. I think you've identified that it won't be achieved within the time scales. And I welcome in there that you put a caveat in there to say it will require a whole council approach. I just hope that members will support you on this, because there can be very, very controversial conversations taking place when planning gets involved. So, I wish you good luck, and I'll support you on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Richards. If I could just put into perspective, whilst £2 million sounds a lot of money, we've got 120 adults in accommodation, in residential accommodation, costing over £100,000 a year. And we've got 220 adults in accommodation costing between £50,000 and £100,000. An average cost now of an adult placement is £5,000 a week. So, you know, it's nonsensical to think that we can't do this. It's a small proportion of the adult services budget, but it's the highest cost. When you look at this compared to the older people's, it's, you know, we're talking over £25 million on a small cohort of people. So I think it is doable, but you're right, Councillor Richards, we do need council support, full council support to deliver. Thank you.
I think to add on to that council support as well, it's about, as Hugh said, I know things take time, but sometimes that actually takes too much time in our own departments. So I think that speed up of our own departments across working together is key too. No more questions there. Right, okay. Let's move on, Angela.
Okay, we move on to the outcome focused reviews, £650,000. We currently have 32 supported living schemes, some of which are run by the same providers and are also situated in close proximity to each other. We believe there is opportunities to share care, and I mean share care safely. We currently spend £1.2 million on sleep-ins. That's just in case. And we've had issues with Fire Authority, which I'm sure Hayley will speak about in a minute. But we think with the use of assistive technology and utilising our falls response schemes, there are opportunities to reduce costs. What we are finding is, I mean, we've got somebody working on just challenging these costs, providers being risk averse, 2-to-1 care as opposed to 1-to-1 care. And we've already this year alone clawed back £750,000 just by challenging providers. So we know there's scope out there for more. But I'll stop there, Chair, and I'll just ask Hayley to highlight some of the risks.
Yeah, again, so quite a similar theme. So the biggest risk around making any changes is that perception again that we're taking something away. We have clawed back a lot of money from these outcome focused reviews, but that it's not good enough to be in a position where we have to continuously claw back. So we are working with legal around the mechanisms in which we do that, and also to tighten up on our process of review going forward. We have proposed looking at schemes to develop a more cluster type model. So we would link up supported living schemes together. That would create efficiencies really with nighttime support. So we've got multiple schemes, you know, with sleep-ins, wakefuls, and, you know, and to put it bluntly, we're paying people to sleep, and that is necessary in some circumstances. We're not talking about taking it away. What we're talking about is linking up services to be more efficient around that and develop a cluster. That does come with risk in terms of perception of taking away, and also providers creating a bit of a barrier because there is an expectation in terms of them working together. We've also most recently, which we will bring a paper on when it's appropriate, had some barriers around fire safety. So there is some guidance floated around, and it is guidance rather than legislation that is preventing us from doing anything at present, and it's actually creating a bit of an issue in terms of us having to put more staff in, which is unnecessary. So we've got that going on at the moment, but we've got a bit of a task group to try and overcome those measures, and we are hopeful that we've got some intervention to be able to stop that.
Thank you, Hayley. Any members got any questions on that? Peter?
Yeah, thank you, Chair, again. Service users' willingness to accept models of care. Question I've got, Angela, there is, we know we're looking after people in their own home on 4 calls a day, when really they should be in a nursing home. Now, would that come under that remit, or, and the other part of that question being the lack of provision for care homes at this moment in time? We all know that the provision isn't out there. Quality care in care homes is at a minimum at the moment. So there's a lot of work to do there. So, but coming back to that willingness, would that include people we're looking after in their own homes where they really should be in a nursing home?
No, Councillor Richards, that's the next one I'm going to come on to. I think what we're talking about here is people who are in supported living accommodation, for example, who actually should be going into residential care. So providers are increasing 3 to 1 because they can't manage people in those accommodation. And we are actually working with providers. These are in the main people with learning disabilities, and our residential care homes are not accepting of people with learning disabilities. Hayley, as a commissioner, is working alongside the homes now. We're saying, when these people get dementia, is that any different to an older person with dementia? But there's a perception from the care homes that they can't manage the needs. So we're looking at that currently, but that's a separate issue to the one I'm coming on to next, Councillor Richards.
Can I just come back there, Chair? So what we're saying is that we've got care provision in care homes within the community. Are we saying that, or are we saying we haven't?
We're nearly at saturation point, but there's separate conversations going on with other providers who are coming into Neath Talbot, if I put it that way.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Angela.
Hayley, do you want to come back in? Did you have your hand up?
I did, yes, but Angela just covered it. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks. If you just move straight on again now, please, Angela.
Okay, so this is £500,000 against domiciliary care calls, etc. So just to put into perspective for members, we currently provide 2,240 double-handed calls. That's 2 people going into a household 4 times a day at a cost of £2.7 million. Our occupational therapists are telling us that some of these calls could be reduced to single-handed calls with the right equipment and the right training. If we were to reduce just a quarter of these calls, that would bring in £600,000 in saving. And more importantly, it would be a far better outcome for the individuals to have one person providing their care needs as opposed to 2. So that's that one in a nutshell. Happy to take questions. If I move to Adrian, just to tell us about the risks that's involved in that one.
Yeah, hi, I'm Adrian Bradshaw, Principal Officer. I suppose the main risk with this is the reluctance of providers to accept those new working practices. And also, I suppose, individuals and families perceiving it as a cut or some anxieties as opposed to that change in working. If they've been very familiar and used to 2 carers visiting, and now that's going to reduce to 1, then understandably there can be some anxiety then from individuals and families.
And I got one question.
Yeah, you're saying that the OTs have identified if you've made adaptations, add equipment, what have you, you could reduce it to 1. Are any of these adaptations going to require DFGs, and would it have an impact on it?
No, completely separate. Yeah.
It's more the equipment, like the
Yes, yeah, exactly that.
And I gotta be honest, from personal experiences, the equipment in houses, and like I've had purchasing stores brought in, like obviously people have passed away, and we've had them, and I've just taken them around like to others, and it's been a godsend. It's the little things that actually do matter. So that's a good thing. If we just move straight on then, Ange.
Yes.
Oh, sorry. And Councillor Sharon Freegard.
Thank you. Yeah, for Adrian, really. Just wondering, Adrian, are the providers not liking it because it's lone working and they've got legalities that they have to put in place because it's such a vulnerable situation? Are we putting workers in a precarious situation?
No, I think some of the anxiety sometimes, or because of the change in working practices. So often domiciliary care providers will have double staffed runs, as they call them. So then if you've got some people perhaps now who've been decided by the OTs that they only require 1 member of staff, if that person then isn't in the same run, then there's a reluctance then for the providers to change their working practices. So I suppose it's more to do with the logistics that there's a reluctance. Also, some of the carers as well, because it can be more demanding, because if you're moving someone, you might need to go from one side of the bed round to the other side of the bed in order to undertake a task, and then back round to the other side of the bed. So it can be far more demanding, maybe a call. So whereas if there's 2 carers there, it might make it easier. It can be more demanding on that carer. when they're trying to undertake the task on their own.
I was just thinking, if there are two carers, they safeguard one another. So I just wondered if there was a safeguarding issue with the providers.
If there was, because there are some calls that domiciliary care providers go in for health and safety reasons, and that wouldn't have any impact on that. If they're going in for health and safety reasons, this is purely where the OTs have deemed that historically somebody's required double staffed calls in order to undertake the tasks, but now actually having different techniques and also advances in equipment, that that call could be undertaken by one carer rather than two. If it's because of the situation that carer is going in, that it requires two carers to go because it's felt that for health and safety reasons, then two carers would be needed. That would continue.
Okay, thanks, Adrian. I was just thinking about the liability for the council.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
Thanks.
Chair, if I could just add to that as well. So historically, when we have discharges from hospital, it's always come out as double-handed calls. So we now have our in-house domiciliary care team, the council team, workers in the hospital, right-sizing those packages before they go out. So, we are looking at, so these single-handed calls are already happening in-house. It's just transferring that training, etc., to the external market.
Can I just ask Angela?
Yeah.
Have you had any issues since we've been doing that?
No.
Have there been any? Right. Okay.
No,
thanks.
not at all.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, if I move on to the next one, then this is the Tremor Glyn reablement capacity. So from the 1st of April in 2025, Tremor Glyn will come back into council run services and will be run by this directorate. Initially, we will have 4 reablement beds available to us. The savings are predicated on 12, but we've been very clear with the residents of Tremor Glyn that we wouldn't be moving people unnecessarily, and it would be by a natural wastage. If I just put into perspective how we can deliver this, the average cost of a domiciliary care package, 14 hours a week, 2 calls a day, is roughly £336 versus a residential care placement of about £1,000 a week. So if between a combination of delaying possibly 5 people going into residential care too soon, and by reabling people and right-sizing a package, a combination of that should easily deliver that £260,000 next year. In fact, we're hopeful we could double that figure. Chair.
On that one, again, I think the biggest issue you'd have is staff, is it? Recruitment?
No, we're fully staffed in Tremor Glyn.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we've got OT staff ready to, well, I'll bring Sorel in. Sorel can talk about the risks for that one.
Yeah, thanks, Angela. So in terms of the risks, initially, obviously, we've said we're not going to be moving any individuals on. Therefore, the reablement beds will not be within a set unit. So it will be a bit harder for staff trying to provide 2 models of care. So obviously care for those people that are living in Tremor Glyn long term, and then trying to do reablement care for those individuals that have gone into the reablement unit. So therefore, there will be some issues with that initially until we have a set unit within the home. Aside from this, really, the only sort of the other issue that we need to keep in mind will be if when individuals require to sort of leave the home and if they need domiciliary care package, if there's any delays in the market, then obviously they will be taking up spaces in Tremor Glyn for longer. So that's why we're trying to look at a whole approach to this, really, with the domiciliary care side as well, so that we have that flow through quite as best as we can.
Yeah, and to add to that, Chair, Sorel manages the in-house domiciliary care as well as the reablement unit, and we'd be basing a social worker in the reablement unit to be having those early discussions with the family to move on so that we don't clog the beds.
Yeah, and that's what I meant was the domiciliary care recruitment issues rather than the residential, because that is a big gap of difference in price there, isn't it? Yeah. Any questions from members? No, if we just move on then to
the last one, which is the review of adult services structure. again, this at the moment is a reduction in posts where appropriate. So where we have vacancies currently, and I'm not talking social work vacancies, this is a last resort for me. We will make the cuts elsewhere, but where we have vacancies that we think we can safely lose, we will. Again, risks will be staff morale, although I have to say, given the amount of savings that we have to find, I also have a vacancy factor of £1.3 million to find next year. So I probably will be coming back to members in the short term to talk, as Kerry has done today, about whether we do need to remodel some of the services that we have, because this is it's an inordinate task to try and find this money within budget. I'll stop there, Chair. I just want to conclude afterwards.
Any members' questions? No, we have none.
Okay, if I can just finally say then, as the director said at the beginning, these budget proposals deal with the here and now. What they don't take into account is the additional demand that's coming through the system. So, you know, we've got an ageing population, we've got an increase in presentation of people with learning disabilities and mental health issues. And I've said this before, but other agencies have moved the goalposts. So we've got health still continuing to close beds. We've got probation unable to deal with numbers on caseloads. The police right care, right person is now not dealing with anything with mental health issues. And we've got prisoners being released early into the community. So it's the perfect storm, really. And it's all having a detrimental effect on how we deliver adult social care. Sorry to end on a gloomy note, but that is the world we're living in at the moment.
Thanks for the gloomy note, Angela. But I'm sure now we'll all go dancing out of here now, haven't it? Because it's January and it's a great month, isn't it, everyone? Right. Andrew, is there anything else you want to come in on?
Just to conclude then, Chair, can I thank the heads of service and the staff for talking of committee through that. Can also thank committee for your questions and your interest. I think it's been a really helpful scrutiny committee. And so thank you very much for that. I guess I'm really pleased that Angela said what she said at the end, because I'm very lucky that I have a management group who are both very positive and very optimistic. And so what you might have heard today is their optimism about how they're going to deliver these savings. I'm not as optimistic. Maybe that's because of my position as the director. You know, I'm really worried about having to take £5.5 million out of the service at a time, as I say, where we're seeing excess demand that we're not dealing with at the moment. And some of these things are not going to be as easy, I don't think, as you've heard today. So we'll have some time as we go through next year, if these proposals become real, which I'm expecting that it will. We'll have some time next year to talk through this in a lot more detail and to keep you abreast of where we're at on each of these lines. But I just want to thank committee for their interest. Thank you, Chair.
And on that note, I'd like to obviously thank the director and all staff, because the amount of work that goes in this, and it is depressing. So again, you know, it's well done, because it's not easy, and we do appreciate it. If I can just bring Alan Llewellyn in.
Diolch yn fawr, Cadeirydd. Thanks, Chair, and I'd like to thank scrutiny members for all your comments and questions. These are genuinely helpful as part of the budget process. Andrew, Jarrett, and Shelley, and Kerry, and Angela, and colleagues have set out how seriously we have to take the current financial position and the risks involved, as well as the safeguards that we would need to put in place to ensure the well-being of our service users and all of our staff members. I think that in the proposals, we are not just talking about cuts or savings, but genuine changes and transformation strategies that will protect and improve many services, including bringing several services back in-house where possible and appropriate. As Cabinet members responsible for adult and children's social care, housing and community safety portfolios, we're grateful to colleagues at all levels and senior officers that have supported the investment needed to achieve these strategies. But I think, as Andrew emphasised in his concluding remarks there's no room at all for complacencies, and many pressures on these services are continuing to increase for the reasons that have been illustrated this morning. We will, of course, as Cabinet members, take on board all the points raised today, but can I also ask all members to continue contributing to the budget consultation over the next few weeks, and encourage all your residents in all your wards to do the same, and also to continue to contribute to the lobbying to further strengthen the local government settlement from Welsh Government as far as we possibly can. Diolch yn fawr iawn. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. So, members, this report is for consultation purposes. Therefore, we are noting the report. Go straight on to agenda item 4, which is urgent items, and I have none. So I'm happy to